Salutations, respected viewers. I am George from Ireland. So this video is saying rest in peace, Seamus Mallon. So Seamus Mallon was just called to the great big assembly in the sky yesterday. In case you don't know, Seamus Mallon was one of the foremost nationalist politicians in Northern Ireland for decades, from the 70s into the noughties. So Mr. Mallon, he died at the age of 83. Anyway, he was born in Armagh, which is a county in Northern Ireland, in a small town. His father was a teacher, so they had plenty of books in the house, but not a great deal of money. He was brought up in a Catholic family and was fairly religious all his life. And he was also a nationalist. Now, in Irish terms, that's to say that you believe that Ireland ought to be independent and united, although later on nationalists of almost every stripe became Europhiles, so not independent, part of the European Union, but they certainly didn't want to be part of the United Kingdom. Now, some nationalists are not doctrinaire on this, could accept some form of home rule or perhaps some political connection with Great Britain, not necessarily absolutist on this. Whether it's called a republic or not, didn't matter to him a great deal. But definitely his identity was Irish. He did not regard himself as British, and he never held a British passport. So Irish citizenship is available to people in Northern Ireland as it is to people in the Republic of Ireland. So that was that. He sort of had a fairly conventional, happy family life, and he married. He had children. Was not especially political until the 60s. So Ireland was partitioned in 1920, I suppose, by the Government of Ireland Act, and then the major portion of Ireland left the United Kingdom shortly thereafter to form the Irish Free State. Of course, nowadays it's the Republic of Ireland, which is where I'm from. Anyway, so in Northern Ireland there was the Parliament at Stormont, 52 members of Parliament, and the Unionist Party held the majority of those seats. What does Unionist mean in Irish terms is they want Ireland, or at least part of Ireland, to be united with Great Britain, to the Act of Union to be preserved. And in Northern Ireland, those who were Unionists were overwhelmingly Protestant, whereas those who were nationalists were Catholics, almost without exception. Anyway, so the Unionists ruled the roost, and there was a bit of pork barrel politics going on there, as it does the world over. So Unionists tended to want to reward their supporters and not their opponents. So there was some sectarian animus there as he was growing up. Some Unionists were not just Protestant; they were also anti-Catholic. So Mr. Mallon felt that Catholics were discriminated against. There were no discriminatory laws, but some discriminatory practices by certain Unionist politicians. So he got into politics. There was the Nationalist Party, first of all, which was later then really supplanted by the Social Democratic and Labour Party. Perhaps strange name that, the SDLP, as it didn't have the word nationalist or Irish or anything like that in the name. So he joined that, and he was elected to a county council in the 70s and soon became one of its most prominent spokesmen. So the leader of the SDLP, the founder of it, was John Hume, another teacher from Derry. So the two really led it as a duumvirate, although Mallon didn't always get along with Hume, was irked with him sometimes. And Hume's not seen in public very much these days because I believe he's suffering from dementia. Although it's a pity he didn't stand for the Irish presidency last time and the time before, but fortunately he wasn't well enough for it. He had Mull standing for 97, but he felt the peace process needed him. So by the 70s, the troubles had flared up and the conflict was at its worst. So unfortunately, a lot of Northern Ireland fell into a morass of spite and sectarianism. Mallon remained above the fray. He was certainly a man of forthright opinions, not afraid to express them. So he indefatigably advocated for the beliefs that he held. He wanted Northern Ireland to leave the UK, join the Republic of Ireland, a unitary state, but he would settle for something less than that, something like maybe devolution for the 6 counties within an Irish Republic, or an optional oath to the Crown. He wasn't an absolutist, some sort of sop to unionists, some sort of union of hearts and minds, as he said. So he set his face like flint against prejudice, against all prejudice against people of any creed or ethnicity, and he spoke out against racism in other places, or apartheid in South Africa, He believed in gender equality. Wasn't particularly on board with the gay rights agenda. I suppose that was just a generational thing, because growing up when he did, it was really considered unacceptable. It's only in 1982 that Northern Ireland decriminalised homosexuality. That was Westminster legislation, or should I say homosexual acts. So from his earliest manhood, he was a Europhile, because when he was coming of age in the 50s, the European Economic Community had been founded. And would the Republic of Ireland join? Would the UK join? He thought this was a very splendid thing. So he campaigned in 1975 for the vote for the United Kingdom to stay in the European Economic Community. And that was critical, because the Republic of Ireland and UK had both joined the same day, New Year's Day 1973. Now, some people in the UK felt the Republic of Ireland was not doing enough against the IRA, was sheltering the IRA. Obviously, the Irish government, we weren't deliberately doing it, and the Garda Síochána did arrest IRA men, INLA men, but OK could have been more active. It was difficult, because almost everyone in the Republic of Ireland is a nationalist and sympathises at least with the objectives of the IRA, if not the methods. So some people in the UK saying, let's take the gloves off, let's bomb Dublin, or let's at least have the British Army cross over the border in hot pursuit, or we know where the IRA training bases are, let's just go and blow them up. But the thing is, if the UK had done that, that would have been violating the sovereignty of a neighbouring EU state, with the UK being chucked out of it. So it meant that the United Kingdom was more restrained in its efforts to stamp out the IRA and the INLA. So Mallon, though he was in some respects meek and mild, he was also a man of immense moral courage and physical courage. Though he wasn't going to hurt anybody else, he faced a serious possibility of coming to grief himself, receiving regular death threats from loyalists and indeed Republicans, because he pulled no punches. He was fulsome in his denunciation of terrorism, whether by loyalists or Republicans. He also spoke out frankly about brutality by the security forces. So he was a man who you couldn't fault him for honesty or candour. He had great strength of character. He was a man of probity. I haven't even heard his worst enemy say that he was ever dishonest or ever lacked for integrity. Was a conviction politician, was in it for the right reasons to serve the public. He wasn't grandstanding. He was devoid of any personal vanity. He was always presentable. But as I say, he found John Hume difficult to work with at times, felt that Hume was not condemnatory enough of the IRA and the INLA. And in the late 80s, John Hume had some secret meetings with Sinn Féin, and Sinn Féin was trying to have him speak the IRA filming without his knowledge, so Hume pulled out of it, and he hadn't kept Seamus Mallon apprised of the plan. But in the late 90s, Seamus Mallon, he developed a very cordial working relationship with David Trimble, who was leader of the Ulster Unionist Party, who was later voted out by his own party. I know Hume was took more of the credit for being architect of the Good Friday Agreement, but when it came to forming this new power-sharing executive under the d'Hondt formula, David Trimble was the First Minister, Seamus Mallon was the Deputy First Minister, and so he was there. So he regularly toured the United States to get funds, to evangelise for the Irish nationalist cause, and also to speak out against the IRA and the Irish National Liberation Army. So eventually Sinn Féin was allowed to go along like that. Just did a quarter peal of 1260 plain bob doubles, no idea what that means. And Sinn Féin were sort of piggybacking on him and hoping that some of his respectability would rub off on them. Now eventually Sinn Féin, they overtook the SDLP as the major nationalist party in the north of Ireland, and north of Ireland was a phrase that Mallon liked to use. But anyway, so the people who'd really done the spade work of peace, the SDLP, are the ones who didn't pick up the credit for it, and they suffered at their polls, their moderation. As he said, people got squeezed in the middle, a bit like Tony Blair said, the Alliance Party, they were totally reasonable people, which is why they had no chance, because they didn't bang the drum loud enough. They weren't really flag wavers. Anyway, so he said it was a small price to pay. He didn't mind if his party suffered at the polls, so long as it saved a single life, and it saved certainly hundreds. Supposing the conflict hadn't ended 22 years ago, how many more people would have been killed? Hundreds, certainly. Even though the security forces were getting a handle on things, and even though the British Army strategy was, as one general said, not to go and kill the enemy, but to try and make as few people were killed as possible, including IRA and ILA men, to arrest them whenever possible and not to kill them. only to kill them if completely unavoidable. Anyway, he will be sorely missed, Seamus Mallon. He retired from politics some years ago. He was exasperated by Brexit, sad to see that his life's work partially undone, and worried about a hard border going up in Northern Ireland. So he was a true gent. He'll be sorely missed. Well, bit of a shame I never met him. I always held him in fairly high regard, and he was soft-spoken, unfailingly courteous. He was really a role model for many people. Perhaps a little uninspiring. Was he too pedagogical, too grandfatherly? But maybe I'm judging him by what it was like in the evening of his life. So that is Seamus Mallon. They don't make him like that anymore.